Welcome to Podcasting for Business Owners. I'm your host, Laura McRae, a podcast consultant, educator, and self-confessed podcast nerd. If you're thinking of launching a podcast or want to grow the one you have, you're in the right place. Hold on to your headphones and let's go. Hello and welcome back to Podcasting for Business Owners, the podcast that helps you share your story, lead your industry, and grow your network through podcasting. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to someone who's been a significant influence in my own business journey, Sheila Anderson. Sheila is a brilliant business and marketing coach who has supported me over the last 2 years, helping me grow my business and master the art of selling my services, especially through Instagram stories. In this episode, we're focusing on how you can use your Instagram stories to sell your business and promote your podcast. Sheila shares practical strategies on how to connect authentically with your audience, build genuine relationships, and make selling feel natural and not pushy. If you've ever felt awkward about promoting your offers or unsure how to turn casual followers into loyal clients, this episode is packed with practical tips that will change how you approach sales, both on your podcast and on Instagram. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Hello, Sheila, and welcome to the show.
Hello, Laura. Thank you so much for having me.
So, can you give us a quick overview of what you do as a business and marketing coach and how you help clients sell through Instagram stories?
I help online service businesses sell not just through stories, through content, through their messaging in a non-sleazy way, because so many people have this fear of selling, of coming across too pushy. So I help them show up as themselves and to really truly own who they are, so that selling doesn't feel like a gross, dirty car salesman pitch, and they're actually learn to become really confident in what they do. We create offers that they love. So selling actually becomes very natural. It almost becomes like a second nature to them by the time we finish working together, because they're so passionate about what they do that it comes across in their content, whether it's through stories, in their content, on their website, like messaging. You apply that across everywhere in your business. So that's what I help with in a nutshell, I guess.
And how can podcasters effectively use Instagram stories to sell their own products and services?
Well, so Instagram stories, and I say this to every single person who comes to work with me, and even those who don't work with me, if you are not using your stories to sell, you are without a doubt leaving money on the table, because all your warmest leads are watching your stories. So whether or not it's podcast or not, your offers, everything, you should be talking about on stories. So stories are really great because that's where we build connections with our audience. It's almost like people get a behind the scenes look into your business, because we can share more in our stories than we do in our content. When people come to your profile on Instagram, you kind of guide them through this buying journey, which your content does that. But your stories takes it a level deeper, because people get to know you. They get to see who you are. That's how you build that know, like, and trust so much faster. So if you're sharing your podcast on stories, people are really going to get a better insight into what it is that you do, what kind of person are you? Because at the end of the day, sales is all about relationships. And in order to sell to someone, they need to have that know, like, trust factor, right? So that's why I say use stories, because you build that know, like, trust factor so much faster than if someone was just going through your content. So when you're talking about your podcast on stories, people almost get to know you, right? They get to see you, they see your face. So you get a glimpse into what these episodes are about. When you have a podcast, it's probably related to your business in some way, because you share a lot of tips, tricks, insights into what you do. So your podcast is just an extension of your stories, because a podcast is going to be like a long form conversation, whereas the stories could just share snippets of that, right? So you use your story as like the segue to get people to listen to your podcast. You could probably touch on the things that you're going to be talking about in the episode, which would generally be something that your audience is probably struggling with, or they probably want more help with, or they want to learn more about. So you use your stories to get them to, listen to an episode by giving them value, tips, advice, whatever it is that they need. And to get more of this good stuff, come and tune into our latest episode, whatever that topic is.
And I guess it's a good way to get connection as well, because with a podcast, you can't really answer a question on the podcast platform, but you could maybe go in your stories and ask them what subjects they'd like you to cover in episodes, and you can leave that question there and they're able to answer it.
Yeah, exactly. And once again, it's all relationship building stuff, right? It's never one-sided for me. It's not like I'm putting up a poll and then you're just going to vote in it and then I'm just going to go off and do something with it. Like that is an invitation for someone to come into your DMs and, maybe you want to expand further on that topic and, start building that relationship. So yes, absolutely, you can get your audience involved, whatever you want to talk about, but take it a step further and start building relationships in the DMs with these people who do vote, who do engage with you, because that's ultimately what is going to sell your services, your offers, whatever it is, by building those relationships. I don't mean just create these relationships thinking this person's going to turn into a client. That is not the vibe of what I do or what I say to clients, but build genuine relationships. I think for me personally, all my clients turn into friends without fail because I build relationships with them before we've even worked together. In saying that, I have had clients who I've never spoken to before because my content has done all that relationship building already. They feel that they already know me, even though I don't know them. So it is something that when I say, building relationships, I mean, like generally get to know someone because they are a human being. They're not just a dollar sign and you're not just going in there just trying to make a sale. So don't go in with that approach and you'll see how much easier selling becomes because it's actually genuine and authentic. And because you genuinely want to help people when you have these relationships, this is how you learn about your audience. You see what they need help with, and you can implement that into, whatever topics you want to talk about in your podcast or whatever offers that you do. All this is gold basically when you have these conversations in your DMs.
Yeah, and it was you that taught me. I remember before we started working together, I used to just share all my posts in stories, and you were like, no, you need to do more than that.
Yes.
Because the great thing with Instagram stories, you can make it two-way. You can put those polls in. You can ask those questions. You can even put links in, which you can't do in the posts. And also, as Sheila said to me before, once you start having those conversations that you started in your Instagram stories, once you're in each other's DMs, then they start seeing your posts at the top because you've built that relationship. So that's how you're working the algorithm from using your Instagram stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, just sharing your post to your stories is really not going to do anything for you unless you were giving some context around your post, for example, and then say, if you want to go dive deeper, check out that post.
So what are some common pitfalls to avoid when trying to sell through Instagram stories?
Sharing your post to stories is not selling at all. I wouldn't even consider that selling. That's just, hey, I have a new post. And people used to do this. Do you remember back when people used to share a reel or whatever, and then they would hide it. So you'd have to go click on it to go view it. That does not work. I'm not going to bother reading that if you're going to cover it up. I'm not interested. People also are time poor. Get to the point. If this is not going to value me, I'm not going to waste my time reading it. Let me know, why do I need to read it? But the biggest mistake, but people who think they're selling, they put the same Canva slides up every day selling their offer. I promise you no one's reading it. If you put the same Canva slides up, people will swipe faster than, this dating app where you go swipe right or left. It's just, if they've read it once, they're just going to assume you're saying the same thing and they're going to keep swiping. People do that a lot. I commend you for even trying to sell. At least you're trying to sell. You're trying to actually move the needle in your business, which is amazing. But there's just obviously far more effective ways to do it. If you think about how you scroll Instagram personally as for a business, like what makes you stop and read something? If you were to see the same Canva slides, what would you do? You would immediately go, next. You're not reading it. It gets to the point where we're just like, oh yeah, I've seen this before. Our brains work really quickly. Like, once we've seen something, I'm like, oh yeah, I know what this is. I'm just going to keep swiping to the next story because you just automatically go, yeah, I know this is trying to sell something to me. So there's definitely an art to it where it's not going to feel gross and sleazy. But if you have to put the same Canva slides, at least just change the graphics or something. All my stories are created in Instagram. I don't use any fancy apps. I don't even make Canva graphics because it's boring. And I know people want to be entertained, or they want to make sure that they are getting value really quickly. Like people's attention spans are like next to nothing. So you need to give people a reason to watch. You need to break their thought patterns. So you need to have a little bit of strategy behind selling in your stories. So if you are putting up the same Canva slides, please stop and try something else. Also, do not put a screen full of text. If there's a screen full of especially small text, people aren't going to read that either. Unless you're Kim Kardashian, people are going to actually hang on to every single thing you say. Don't fill the screen with text. And also when you are talking face to camera, don't just put captions. Because first of all, like half people aren't going to listen to the whole spiel. And if they're not going to listen to you, they're not going to sit and just read the captions, at least summarize what it is you're saying in each slide so they can get to the point and move on to the next part. So at least they're going to get the point that you're trying to make rather than sitting there going, well, this is a complete waste of my time. And I see it all the time. I just don't understand why people do it. I think that just putting captions is also not the solution. Like spend an extra 1 minute writing a few lines of what you're trying to say.
Yeah, that's something only I've started doing since working with you too.
Yeah, and you notice it when you see other people's stories, especially if there's not even captions. Next.
And another thing I noticed when you were saying earlier about get to the point, you always say that you can't stand it when people say, Happy Monday or Happy Hump Day. And every time I hear that now, I'm like, Sheila wouldn't like this. Get to the point. We know what day of the week it is.
If I see Happy Monday, I'm like, next. Look, if some people do enjoy that little, nice conversational side of things. So I guess it depends on who your audience is. What do they like? So you need to know who you're speaking to, who are the kind of clients that you are wanting to attract to your offers, your services. What kind of people do you want listening to your podcast? Are they the kind of people who want to be listening to fluffy, here's making my coffee and then just generally talking about the day? Like for me personally, I'm like, I don't have time for that. And I think majority of business owners don't have time for that. They're like, if you got something good to say, if you got some value to bring, tell me, what is it? There's no need to fluff around, because a lot of the times I can see people who have these long stories and they don't get to the point to the very end. But the problem with that is people have already left. So before you even get a chance to pitch your offer, people have already stopped listening to you because you've just fluffed around for so long that they felt like it's irrelevant for them, so they've moved on. I'm not saying you can't say Happy Monday, whatever, that's fine. It's not the end of the world, but do get to your point quickly because, yeah, people are time poor and they just want to be like, if this is not worth my time, they will move on.
I guess people feel like they want to warm people up before they go into the sale, but they're actually doing themselves a disservice then in stories.
Okay, this is interesting that you say that. First of all, we are a business. People expect you to sell. They know you are going to sell. So get that out and you go, okay, people are expecting me to sell. But that's why people feel pushy or salesy, because they feel like, oh no, I need to warm them up before I say, oh, come work with me or book a call or whatever it is that they're so terrified to say. So that's why they do all this fluffy stuff. But that's not actually doing anything. That's not warming people up at all. If you want people to feel like they are warming up to sell, you need to give them value. Why do they need to come work with you? Why should they listen to you? So by just fluffing around is not building any kind of trust, any kind of authority, nothing. It's not going to entice someone to come and spend their hard-earned money with you because, you're giving all this small talk. That is not going to help with your sale. Like if you want to pitch, then give people a reason to listen to your pitch, so make sure you come in with the value. Like, why do they need to be paying attention? And if you do that, then it makes sense. People are like, well, okay, that was really good. Like, I want to know more of that. So it's only natural for them to want to come in and have a look how it is to work with you. But by saying, Happy Monday, today I took the kids to the park and I did the washing, and I'm just like, that's building zero buying desire for your audience. So cut that out or just make it very quickly. And then, just go into talking about what it is you want to talk about. What is it you're helping your audience with? And just get straight to it. Every day I show up and sell my stories every single day without fail. And I just get straight into it because I know my audience have things to do. And I'm just going to show, right, this is how I'm going to help you today. And I'm going to talk about XYZ. And if you want to know more, then, you know where to find me kind of thing. So that is not helping you at all. If you're feeling like you need to warm your audience up, that is not how you warm your audience up to buy.
Noted.
Yeah.
And I must admit, since we stopped working together, I haven't been in my stories as much at all.
I'm not going to say I didn't notice. Look, selling is something that takes time for people to get comfortable doing. And people ask me like, how do you sell so effortlessly? And it's because I do it every day. The more you do something, the easier it gets. It's just removing that pressure, thinking people are going to think you're salesy. And I said this to you, Laura. I said to every single one of my clients, if you're worried about coming across as salesy, you could never come across as salesy because everything in your body would actually stop that from happening. So you don't ever need to worry about that. But like, as long as you're bringing value and giving reason for, you're helping people, there's nothing salesy about that. I genuinely want to help you. And if you want my help, this is how we can work together. You're not holding anyone to like gunpoint saying you come work with me. You're just giving them that option. You're inviting them to come work with you. And I think if you view sales like that, as relationships and you're just wanting to help, nothing about it actually feels sleazy at all.
I guess it's down to practice as well. If you just start doing it.
It is, absolutely. I sent my clients videos of me when I first started selling, and it was cringe. And all my clients, I said to them, you are all already 20 steps ahead of where I was. So you can see where I was and where I am now. This is not something that I just woke up one day and I could just sell so effortlessly. Like, this has taken time because I made it my priority to learn how to sell. And I just kept doing it every day until now I just don't even think about it. So it is totally possible to learn. You just got to start, just try. And I think more people worry about what others think of them, but in the reality is no one's thinking about you. Everyone is worried about themselves.
And what you used to tell me to do is like when you've done something for a client in the background, so you're working on something and something stood out that you've helped them, just get on stories and tell them what you've done because you're inadvertently selling because you're telling them about your services.
Exactly. So there's so many different ways to show up and sell, and not every sell has to be a direct pitch. As long as you're bringing awareness around what you do every day, you are selling. So when the time comes, for example, like with you, Laura, when you're talking about podcast management, when you're working with clients, and then someone will be like, one day they're like, oh, actually, I need a podcast manager. You'll be top of mind because you've shown up every day. You've brought awareness around what it is that you do. And that is how you become top of mind for people. And this is why when we talk about consistency, once again, consistency is different for everybody. Consistency does not mean posting every day, because if you cannot manage to post consistently every day, then you're going to go to burnout and it's not going to help anybody. But something that has to be sustainable to you. And so your audience get to know, okay, Laura's talking about podcasting. It gets to a point where they just like, yeah, obviously she's talking about that because she's a podcast manager. Like, obviously Sheila's selling today. She's a sales coach, it makes sense. And they don't think, oh, Sheila's selling again. They don't. And if they do, they are not my ideal client, because I walk the walk. And that's something I teach my clients. It is so important to show your audience that what you believe in and what you do is something that you practice as well. So I'm not going to tell my clients shop and sell every day, but I'm not showing up and selling every day. But once again, it has to be sustainable, because we're not here to, burn ourselves to the ground. It's just about being consistent so that your audience remembers you enough to think, okay, when I need a podcast manager, obviously Laura does it, so I'm going to check her out. That's generally how we would work. And that's how I've reached out to businesses in the past. When something's come up and I've needed like a website or a logo, I just like, I remember so-and-so, talking about this, and I'll go check her out.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done the same myself.
Yeah, exactly.
So how can we use Instagram stories to make our podcast episodes feel like a must listen? What are some tricks for creating interest?
Whether it's your podcast, whether you're launching a new offer, you can have fun with it, but like you can tease like snippets of the offer of the podcast, but make it relevant to your audience. Don't just say, I've got a new podcast episode coming out, because once again, it's like people saying, I've got something's coming. They don't care. Something's coming. I'm like, whatever, I'll wait till it comes. I guess, with a podcast, it'd be similar. You would have to tap into what is the episode about? How is it going to help your audience? And that's what you would tease them with. I know this is what my audience struggles with. So this is what's coming that's going to help you with that. So you'd be tapping into those things that your audience is struggling with, painting that picture of like, what is it that their life looks like today? And then the answer is inside this podcast, come and have a listen to that. So it's like same thing when you're launching a new offer. You wouldn't say something's coming, and all of a sudden, bam, here's my new offer. We all go on like a buying journey, right? We need to go through awareness through the consideration stage before we end up buying something. So if you just say, we've got, exciting new podcast episode coming and you want people to listen to it when it comes out, they go into that consideration stage once you bring it out. They're like, oh, that's what it's about. I'm thinking about, do I really need to listen to this? And they'll think about it. And then, in the end, they might end up forgetting about it and they'll move on. So if you want people to listen to it as soon as it drops, you need to warm them up to the episode. And that's when you bring awareness around the things that they're going to be struggling with. Or once again, what is it that you're talking about in this episode? If this is something that they need help with, talk about the things that they are struggling with right now and give them, a heads up that, this new podcast episode is coming out that's going to help tackle just this. Be teasing that on your stories for, the week in the lead up to your episode. And then when the episode drops, they'll be like, all right, I'm ready to listen to it now because you've brought so much awareness around the things that they need help with. Once again, not everybody knows that they need help with certain things. So when you bring that awareness around it, they'll be like, obviously then I need to listen to this because I struggle with all these things. So Laura obviously gets it. She understands this is what I need help with. So I'm going to check out this podcast and get more information on it.
You might be able to help me with this then. So we're recording this episode now. So what I normally do, so I will take a photo of us recording this episode.
Yep.
And then I'll put it in my stories and say, interview with Sheila about selling your podcast on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait for this to launch or whatever.
Yep.
Just so they have a little teaser. This episode won't come out for another couple of weeks, but they would have seen that. Well, they might not have seen it, but they might have seen that. And then on the actual run up to the episode launch, I'll do posts related to the episode. Then when it launches, I'll put a snippet of our interview as well as that photo reminding them and just talk about the episode a lot on that day. So that's how I would do it. Could you think up any other ways?
And that's great. But what are you doing in your stories? You're doing it in your content, but you're doing it in your stories.
That's it. Yeah. So the only thing I was thinking was just like that photo of you now that I would take and put in my stories, but there's probably more I could do.
100%. Yes. So probably, I'm assuming a lot of your listeners need to know how to sell on stories. They want people to listen to their podcast. So you'd be talking about, all the things that they probably are doing so that they can see that you go, all right, yeah, I'm doing that. But you're like, but that's what you shouldn't be doing after our conversation. Like, so we've said, I said, you should be doing this. So you can start teasing about the things that you probably should be doing. You're doing, you're just sharing your podcast on the day it launches and then you're like wondering why no one's listening. This is why, and then you get into that in your stories and you just probably talk about the struggles that they have getting people to listen to their podcast. So I would be tapping into that for the week in the lead up to the podcast launching. And you just it doesn't need to be long-winded either. You could just touch on, if you're just sharing your post to your stories and you're wondering why no one's clicking on the link to listen to your podcast. I've got a podcast episode coming with Sheila that's going to get into XYZ, something like that. Educate your audience on your stories and why they need to listen to this episode. Once again, you need to make it worth their while. Why should they listen? Why is it relevant to them? How is it going to help them? Because that's when they'll pay attention. Human beings are selfish. At the end of the day, we only care about us and our well-being by nature. This is how we are. So you need to make sure that what you are sharing is relevant and it's going to help your audience because that's what's going to make them want to listen.
So I've got posts scheduled on the run up to the launch of the actual episode, giving tips and advice, and then before the actual launch of the episode. So would you recommend then, from what you're saying, that go face to camera in your stories and do it there as well? So you've got your posts and you've got your stories. So is that build up for like a week till the episode?
100%. Also, you don't have to go face to camera because I know some people have this fear of going face to camera, that if you're not saying you have to, it's definitely obviously a lot more powerful when you go face to camera. But, if you don't want to do that straight away, just repurpose your content. And when I say repurpose, I mean break it up into some slides on your stories. If you've got it on your grid, repurpose for your stories. And because if you are not repurposing content, by the way, you are working way too hard, like way too hard. Because as you know, only a very small amount of our audience actually sees our content. So if you are not repurposing, you're honestly working far too hard. Repurpose your content to your stories. People absorb information differently. Some people prefer to just read a static post. Some people register better when it's face to camera, or if it's broken up in, little bite-sized pieces and stories. Play around with that for sure. So if you've already got your content created on your grid, I will just be repurposing it for your stories. Literally read one of the slides even. I do this all the time. It lands differently for people when you speak it, when you read it, when you hear it. It's always going to come across different for people. So play around with the different ways that you can talk about, what it is that you do, whether it's, on your grid or on your stories, but you absolutely should be doing it. Reuse it multiple times.
You've inspired me. I'm going to start doing it. What I was thinking of doing is with the transcript. So what I've done with my episodes coming up, I've put it through ChatGPT and asked it to pull out the best quotes. And a lot of them are rubbish, but I can always get at least 3 quotes that are good. So what I was thinking of doing is, based on those quotes that it's pulled, I'll do a little face to camera about that particular point that it's talked about. And so that would be the run up. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yes. Perfect. Like, once again, we're just taking a small snippet. We don't need to overwhelm your audience with like the entire episode. Pull out something that's going to be interesting to your audience, tease that a little bit. And like, if they want to know more, they'll tune into the episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great way to do it.
Right. I'm going to start.
Yes. And I'm going to be watching.
Yeah. I've said it now, haven't I?
That's right.
And another thing, someone recommended a teleprompter to me. So again, for
your stories,
speaking to camera, if that makes it easier. What do you reckon on teleprompting? Because I must admit, I did use it and I felt like I was reading.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's maybe just better to go with the flow if you can.
Yes, because that's the beauty of stories. It's that unfiltered version of you. And for me, that is basically what changed my business for me. The more I showed up as myself, the more I attracted the right kind of clients. At first, I was so terrified of swearing or coming across unprofessional. It was exhausting trying to pretend to be somebody I wasn't. In the end, I just got too tired doing it and I just started to loosen up a bit. And it's honestly changed my business. So you don't need to have a perfectly scripted story. You're just literally talking to your audience, pretending you're talking to someone else on the other side, a friend. Pretend you're talking to a friend. And then that's all you really need to do. It doesn't need to be perfectly curated at all. In fact, I recommend it's not, because like you said, when it sounds like you're just reading, people would probably tune out because it just sounds a bit monotonous, it's not really great to watch.
And I did do an Instagram reel the other day and I did a big stumble, and normally I would have started all over again, but I kept going with it and I thought, you know what, it's not that bad.
It's not, and it makes you relatable, okay? And it really makes you human. And that's what people love to see in your stories. Like, they're like, oh, she's just like me. Stories really helps people connect with the human behind the business, which is what we ultimately want to do if you want to be selling at the end of the day, because people want to have a relationship with you before they buy it. If you're finding it a bit difficult at first, I would say just write out the notes you want to say and just, practice it a few times, record it. If you don't like it, just maybe record it a couple of times. But I honestly, and I remember having this conversation with you when we first started, please do not spend hours recording a story. There's no point, because once again, their attention spans are very short. So you could spend all this time creating what you think is perfect Instagram story, and then nobody watches it. Like, just shop as yourself. And if you make a few mistakes, who cares? No one is going to be judging you.
It is disheartening when you spend ages on something and then you look at your stories and about 25 people have looked at it.
Well, exactly.
Not worth it.
It's not. And especially when it's something that you do need to get in the habit of doing daily, it's just not sustainable. But also, look, it's the whole vanity metrics, right? People are like, oh, only X amount of people watch my stories. Yes, but well, what if one person bought? It just takes one person. And once again, we're building relationships. And that's still 25 people. Would you stand in front of a room of 25 people? I say this to my clients all the time. So like, you're like, oh, it's only 25 people. I'm like, all right, get 25 people out in front of you and pitch your offer. All of a sudden you'll be like, oh shit, okay, actually maybe that's not so bad.
Yeah, it's a lot of people, isn't it?
It is. And it's not even about the number. I say, that's 25 people who are probably watching your stories all the time. I would much rather have a loyal community over like 20,000 people watching my stories and never buying. So honestly, don't use the number of followers, number of likes, number of people who watch your stories as a measure of success, because are they translating to dollars into the bank account? Probably not. I've said this all the time. Majority of my high ticket clients come through my stories, have never even engaged with me. Sometimes I've never even spoken to them before. So if I base that off, people liking or replying to my stories, thinking, oh, nobody's watching or buying, then I stop showing up because I don't have X number of people watching. If I did that, then I definitely wouldn't have any clients, So that's why you need to be showing up on your stories.
I know. You've got me all excited. I'm going to get on my stories as soon as we're off recording this episode. So how can features like polls, questions or stickers make our stories more engaging when promoting our episodes?
100% use them, the engagement stickers. I use them throughout my stories because once again, we want people to stay engaged. So this is an actual tool that does help with the algorithm, right? So when more people engage with stories, the more it gets pushed up for your audience, right? So that little circle kind of goes up to the front a bit more. So when people engage with that, but also don't just use it to get people to tap a sticker. Like I always use it in a way where it opens up a conversation I can have in the DMs. So if you're asking questions, you're asking people to tap whatever, give them a reason to tap. And then, if that's to whether come into your DMs and have a conversation further to develop that relationship, do it that way. So sometimes I'll use engagement stickers just purely for engagement. But it is a really good opportunity to get people to open up and invite yourself into their DMs. So whenever I use them, for example, if you want to know more information about this episode, click on this and I'll send you a DM. I'm not selling to them. I'm just telling you, if you want to know a bit more about the episode, just tap on this sticker and I'll give you some more information. And that's not selling to them. But once you're in the DMs, then you can start building a relationship with this person, right? You can start having a conversation. So that's how I would recommend using your stickers and polls. Don't just have them just for the sake of tapping.
So that's a good idea. So when I've been promoting an episode, I'll put a link to the episode, but maybe I should do other ones as well where it's the sticker, tap this sticker and I'll send you the link.
Yep.
So at least then I'm getting in their DMs.
Yes, exactly.
So use both.
Yes, absolutely. I try to use both as well because if you do have links in your stories, Instagram does almost penalize you for using links because you're taking people off the platform, right? So they don't push that as much. But, we still need to put links in. But that's why a good way, sometimes I alternate between, links, and then another day I'll just use, if you want more information, if you want a link, tap on the sticker and I'll send it to you. Mainly because I like to have conversations with people. And especially if you are selling, people generally would like to have a conversation with someone before they buy. So rather than just sticking up links and go, yeah, here you go figure it yourself, start a conversation.
Yeah, someone did say to me the other day when I sent them a link to, I think it was a lead magnet or something, and instead of just sending a copy and paste or used ManyChat, because I don't use ManyChat, I used a customized message to them.
Yes.
She seemed really thankful and happy that I'd sent her a personal message because she was expecting just a robot response back.
Yes.
So it makes a difference to your connection there with your audience.
It does, and it's also, like I said, it's an opportunity to have, obviously if they're asking for the link for something, there's clearly a need there for them that they need fulfilled, which obviously either your lead magnet or your offer or whatever it is does. So having that conversation is also just to, make sure you understand, is this what you really need? Let's have a conversation about it. That's all I'm saying is I'm just going to have a conversation. I'm not going to pressure you into buying anything. But unfortunately, that is what the landscape has turned into, that people are so terrified of voting in polls or tapping on stickers because they think, oh, you're just going to come to my DMs and sell to me. And unfortunately, a lot of people do that, which is why a lot of people hate sales. I just drill into my audience over and over again. Like, if you vote in my poll, I'll even say, I'm not coming to sell to you. I genuinely want to help. So if you want more information, just tap in. I'm just going to come in. We have a zero pressure chat. And it sucks that I have to say that sometimes, but if it helps someone bring their guard down a little bit just so I can come and help them and give them some advice, then I'll do it.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
How often do you think we should mention our podcast in our stories to keep it top of mind without overdoing it?
Depending what the topic is, right? So during the week, you don't always have to be, like I said, pitching, but bringing awareness around, maybe this podcast episode is coming. You could be talking about something and you go, oh, by the way, my latest episode is going to be all on this. It's coming out end of the week or whatever, right? And then carry on, talk about other things. You can just mention it, or, you could even be like showing behind the scenes of what you're working on. Literally just like a one line mention this podcast episode is coming out. And then when the podcast does come out, that's when you go, right, here's the link for the episode. You go into what you go into in detail, who the episode is going to help. But it's like when people say, oh, so how often do I talk about my offer? I'm just like, well, you could talk about it every day, to be honest. It doesn't need to be a full pitch. You could talk about an offer that you've got. And if you want more information, I've got a really good episode coming out end of the week. Like literally like a one line. It's once again, we're bringing that awareness around what we do so people think of you when the time comes. And also saying something one time will not cut it. You need to drill it into people's head like they do, because we do generally need to hear things multiple times before it actually registers for us. Oh, that could actually help me. I do need this. As long as you're, mixing it up, there's different ways to talk about your podcast. Like you can come at it from a different angle, then you could literally talk about it every day. If you just talk about it from one topic you've covered in this podcast, and then there'll be another question that come up that you could relate to the podcast, so you could talk about it every day and it won't sound like you're being stale or boring. Messaging is all about saying the same thing in different ways. So you could actually talk about your podcast every day and people wouldn't be bored of it if you just come at it from different ways.
Yeah, I was just thinking that as long as you're giving your audience a message or they're taking something away each time and it's different.
Exactly.
And you can always talk about past episodes too. It could be ones you released 6 months ago that you want to boost again.
Exactly.
It can always be different every day.
Exactly.
You've got me excited to get my stories again.
Exactly. And you'd have so much content, especially with podcasts, because like they are long form. There'd be so much that you could really help nurture your audience with. Like if you want them to, learn more from you, like send them to these podcasts and like exactly. You could always talk about past episodes. It's all authority building, right? It's all building that authority, positioning you as that go-to person in your industry so you're top of mind for your audience.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sheila. You've got me all excited about getting back in my Instagram stories.
I'm so excited, Laura.
Yes, it's so good. I've had my own little coaching call here today, so thanks very much.
Well, hopefully it will inspire everybody else too.
Yes, definitely. And so thank you, Sheila. And lastly, where can we find and connect with you?
You can find me on Instagram. That's where I like to hang out the most. And obviously I've got a website where you can view, all my different offers and ways we can work together. But definitely Instagram is the best place to find me. It's 2_ Sheila Anderson for Instagram.
Perfect. Okay. And I'll put all the links to that in the show notes too.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheila. Bye. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Sheila as much as I did. She has a real knack for breaking down the sales process in a way that feels authentic and doable, doesn't she? If you're ready to start applying these tips, why not begin with your podcast? Selling doesn't have to feel complicated or uncomfortable. It's all about connection. And if you're looking for more tips on marketing your podcast through Instagram, be sure to check out episode 7, where I chat with Jenna Warrener. The episode's called How to Create Engaging Instagram Content. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in to Podcasting for Business Owners. Until next time, keep sharing your story, leading your industry, and growing your network through podcasting. If you found value in this podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and a review would be even better. Your support shows that this is a good show, which will attract high-profile guests and in turn deliver greater value to you. This podcast is produced and edited by me. Don't waste your time on editing. Let me help you with your podcast. Check out the links in the show notes to get in touch.